There's a shiny new Final Fantasy this year, with a PBS mind and an HBO body. And like most games with more Roman numerals than the Super Bowl, it's tailored for those who are playing hide and seek with the series for the past 2 decades, due to Square Enix's commitment to launching, well, let's call them creative experiments. Square Enix has decided to embrace these latecomers by evaporating the series' identity. It's the phase where long-term fans would typically dust off their keyboard and embark on the usual Reddit journey of lamenting, "Remember when it was just us, the gamers, and no women?" Such bitterness usually requires a foundation of nostalgia to erode, a feat Square Enix hasn't achieved over the past couple of decades in my opinion, with most of that time being Final Fantasy XIII and its spin-offs or an MMO. Their pivot from tradition does bring unexpected charm, but much like watching a lion perform ballet, you can't help but feel it's been abused. This game's approach to evolution is more out with the old in with a, wait, what is that? Is that Devil May Cry? In Game of Thrones? What the hell? 3 very different pieces of entertainment were locked in a room with a lot of alcohol, hoping the offspring wouldn't have too many extra limbs. Though it seems MMO enthusiasts were grinning contentedly amid their voyeurism, having stuck to playing Final Fantasy XIV after Square Enix released it a second time, which probably goes toward explaining why Square Enix turned Final Fantasy XVI's development over to the team responsible for their Golden Goose, because Final Fantasy XVI often feels like it started life as an expansion for Final Fantasy XIV, with dungeons so linear they could double as railway tracks, control over your own character, almost no activities besides fighting enemies and managing your inventory, one-dimensional side quests and bosses who all have their own circular arena and helpfully mark the floor where they're about to attack. So here we are, at the junction where Square Enix theorizes that the desire for turn-based RPGs has dwindled to only people who buy pixelated indie and retro games, suggesting that most players must be covertly coerced into a form of RPG that has had every element of a role-playing game stripped from it. What better time than to unleash their latest creation just a whisker away from the release of Baldur's Gate 3? It's like trying to sprint after you just donated both kidneys. Such daring reconfigurations usually emerge when the old formula has been milk drier than a desert bone, with every conceivable gameplay angle brushed clean and displayed like a petrified fossil. But RPGs are like bears with an infinite picnic basket of playstyles, and Final Fantasy has at most used 4 of them. Why make subtle tweaks when you can merely discard the entire toolbox, the manual, and tell the repairman to shove off? Your first decision is whether you would like to play the game in action-focused or story-focused mode. Here's a thought. How about I paid full price so give me both focus mode? It's like buying a sandwich and being asked if you want bread or filling. It's an option that's appearing in more and more games these days, and I can't help but feel the gremlin of annoyance rise up every time I've offered it. When do we convince ourselves that people who aren't into games accidentally buy them along with a $600 console needed to play them, get it home, and smack their forehead in disbelief that it isn't a movie they can sit back and watch as events unfold? I do have to wonder what's up with Square Enix raising Ifrit's profile so high in recent years. I always thought of him as the Ross of Final Fantasy summons. This now makes 2 Final Fantasy games in a row that begin with an in medias res fight against him, with Ifrit serving as a main antagonist in Final Fantasy XV and now as a protagonist in Final Fantasy XVI.
Our kind do not question orders, we follow them. Try to keep that in mind.
If there's one thing I've learned from identification tattoos on subjugated people, it's that the oppressors don't bother making them look stylish. The branded are essentially magical slaves, and they seem like a good group of people to subjugate according to this world's logic. Building a mature story on something as dark as slavery is a fine enough fit for a setting like this, but the issue is the game leans into it like they think you won't notice unless it's included in every facet of life. You remember how in Pokemon everything revolves around Pokemon to the point where it becomes illogical? Like you'd expect to find a Pikachu-powered toaster in every kitchen. It's the same here. All of Valencia society revolves around magical slaves, who are mistreated to a cartoonishly evil degree. You have to start asking yourself why Clive commits to saving a society so rotten to its very core. It's akin to an African rubber farmer wanting to save Belgium from itself. Meet Clive, the first ever adult protagonist in Final Fantasy history. He even has sex with women. Though, let's be real, he looks like he's still raiding his dad's shaving kit. In typical JRPG fashion, he won't look a day past 25 no matter how many war-torn scars or tales of misery he's carrying. The game does briefly send you back via flashback to the traditional saving the world age of 15, but I reckon the universe just wanted to show that teens screwing up instead of saving the world isn't exclusively an Earth phenomenon.
Focus, Wyvern. You are key to this mission's success.
Clive being the key to success in their mission to kill Shiva is rather unclear. There's nothing special about Clive at this time that make him your go-to person for killing a dominant. Oh look, glowing blue rocks, which, when lobbed, are as effective as, well, non-glowing regular rocks. Surely there's a warehouse somewhere, filled with disappointed wizards regretting their decision to spend time enchanting these things. This game's similarities with Game of Thrones are so brazen, I'm half expecting a cameo from a digital coffee cup left on a castle table. The main character is a dark-haired former prince who was betrayed and made into a slave soldier. There's a very large man with the mind of a child who's incredibly helpful, another very large man who's extremely violent and strong, a scheming mother who has no qualms about killing her own husband and children, a would-be child emperor with an insufferable personality, a pretty blonde who's associated with dragons, and even the enemies that make up the looming threat that overshadows the political squabbling are just people colored off blue. The attempt at nudity is a cute touch, characters are prone to get naked for the first time in the series, and sex is even implied. There are worse things to take inspiration from, so I can't blame them for it, but when the main character's morals and actions are so unquestionably good, you lose the moral greatness Game of Thrones was known for. There's never any question who's right and wrong, with not a single hard moral choice to be made by any of them. It all ends up being like Game of Thrones, but more like the last few seasons, after the actors had renegotiated their nudity clauses, and the writers were hoping to finish up so they could work on Star Wars. The various kingdoms of Alestia are kept in check by dominants, humans who can transform into godlike monsters. Nations with dominants at war is like a staring contest with mirrored sunglasses. You're never going to see the other guy blink. At some point, they always end up using their dominant, and the other side will use theirs, and the battle will end in a stalemate. There isn't a single conclusive end to any war in this game for that very reason. Yet no side seems like they want to stop fighting. That boulder had Clive dead to rights. It's as if the universe paused, whispered to Clive, "Not today," and had him magically avoid it.
I told you before, you do not get to die here.
Maybe you could have told that to the other member of your team, the one that did get crushed by a boulder. Clive then flashbacks to 13 years ago, all the way back to a combat tutorial of all things. There are two huge differences that separate this Final Fantasy from other games in this series. The first is tone, with a plot attempting a more mature narrative that ultimately still follows a tried and true formula of an evil being who wants to destroy the world by manipulating everyone from behind the scenes. They just say the word fuck leading up to that. But the largest difference lies in the combat, being the first title to not focus on party-based combat, and instead preferring to be an action game with one character. If I'm judging the game on combat mechanics alone, then I suppose this game would be pretty positive, since it is more or less Devil May Cry, having hired DMC5's combat director even. It plays well, hits well, and looks very impressive on screen. There's been quite a lot of snobbery thrown at Final Fantasy XVI in regards to it being a pure action-based RPG, and to their credit, the snobs are 100% correct. I don't know where Final Fantasy gets off calling itself a role-playing game anymore. There's no party or other characters to control, although the game does try to trick you into thinking you have one, giving Clive a dog and later a woman, only one of which you can give orders to. But while they were figuring out this new direction for the series, it wouldn't have hurt to throw out the notion that a Final Fantasy game has to take over 40 hours of playthrough. Just because you added more action and suggested nudity doesn't mean I want to stick around for that long. Devil May Cry tends to only take 12 or so hours of playthrough, and that has just as much suggested nudity and over-the-top action. The stagger system, the remaining malignant cancer that was introduced back in Final Fantasy XIII and just won't go into remission. If you wail on an enemy enough to deplete its stamina, it will become staggered and helpless. It's a manufactured mechanic because the only reason you would need a window where you deal out extra damage against a helpless enemy is because you keep making the enemies too tanky, Square Enix. I kept upgrading my weapons every chance I got, but it still felt like sawing down an oak with the wrong side of a butter knife. Joshua has cinematic disease syndrome. Normally this comes to a head fairly quickly, but Joshua's disease, whatever it is, endures until the very end of the game, like an annoying cold you can't shake off. Out of all the characters in the game, Clive and Joshua's mother was my favorite. She's the only one that really pulled off the Game of Thrones style character they were going for. Self-centered and power-hungry, the only thing she cares about is the power created through royal birth and titles. This woman is in her 40s, by the way. Moisturizer in this universe works like a miracle potion.
War is coming, my boy. We must make ready.
Dad, save the trailer lines for later, will you? This game's Euro-centric nature received a lot of discussion on gaming sites and X. Twitter. Due to there not being a single non-white person anywhere to be found in the cast. Supposedly, this was due to the developers wanting to tell a very European fantasy-inspired tale. But I think it mainly came down to how prevalent slavery is in the world. You'd have to look to ancient Sparta to find a more slave-based economy. It's like Square Enix looked at the complicated world of racial politics, blinked, and thought, maybe just not this time, and decided it would be better if they only depicted white people as slaves and slave owners. Jill is Clive's childhood friend, and later becomes his ally as Shiva's dominant. Despite having the power of a god, she's little more than a wallpaper. Most of the scenes she appears in can be described as, and Jill was there too. Her dog ends up being more useful than her.
Most lie under a pall of black. In just these few moons, the Blight has taken nigh on all of the northern reaches.
Even when under the influence of Game of Thrones, Final Fantasy can never drop the evil miasma plotline.
You will have heard the reports, I'm sure, of beastmen from the north being sighted within our borders. Goblins in the Stillwind Marshes. I know of the rumors, yes.
Then you know what must be done.
Clive's father sends him on a mission to prove himself by genociding a group of intelligent creatures living in a swamp and bothering no one. They're just fleeing the blight, so they're refugees even. For the sake of making the main character more powerful than ever, something had to give. You'll still have companions who fight beside you, but AI controlled. With a lack of interesting controllable party members, it makes for the loneliest Final Fantasy game in the series. Environments look great and are richly detailed, but the MMO origins of the dev team come across a bit too much for the single-player game. Every dungeon is just a few hallways and square rooms stitched together until you reach a boss fight in a big circular arena, and bosses don't so much as attack you as they attack the floor and hope you will be standing on the particular tile they're about to annihilate. They may as well hang a neon sign saying, "I'm going to hit here. Move, genius." Square Enix is adopting QuickTime events now that other developers have gotten the memo that no one likes them, and are even going as far as removing them from remakes of their classic games, transforming into the cat lady of developers who takes in every mangy stray she finds to fill the hole in her life.
I've never really been one for cakes and ale.
It's the vegetables I don't like.
Being a picky eater in a time when farming was at the mercy of the elements even at the best of times would mean you starve. And your world is currently gripped by the blight, which is slowly choking the life out of the planet. The food issue does get brought up later by the Emperor of Sambrek as justification for invading a neighboring country. But not once has anyone ever seemed to be going hungry due to lack of food, despite the plot telling you the planet is mostly dead. Even the plucky resistance Clive is part of later on is able to grow plenty to eat while hiding out in the middle of the blighted wasteland.
Supplies from the capital.
These Imperial cutthroats didn't need to deceive anyone by posing as a supplies delivery. They already had people inside Phoenix Gate posing as Rosarian soldiers who would have opened the gate for them. Clive might just be pushing instead of pulling on the door, because there is nothing keeping it closed from this side.
There are chocobos in the stables. Father, take Joshua and get to safety.
No, I'm not going without you. You're supposed to be my shield, remember?
I remember, which is why I'm going to hold the enemy here while you make your escape.
Or you could all escape together since the attackers don't know where you are. There's no one to hold back unless you plan to make noise. But Clive and the commander go and pick a fight with a dragoon in a completely different area instead of making sure his father and brother escape safely.
We issued these sashes but yesterday, in Rosalith. If they were already among us, what if there were others?
Father and Joshua are in danger.
The guys you just killed were all wearing Imperial armor. If they were disguised as Rosarian soldiers earlier, then they had to bring their Imperial armor with them unnoticed to Phoenix Gate, then slip into it once the attack began, thus negating their ability to move among Rosarians unnoticed. Yet none of them took advantage of subterfuge to kill him before they started sacking the place. Ultima's first appearance in the game has him disguised as a human wearing a cloak, which is completely unnecessary since no one knows who he is right now, and ends up being the same cloak Clive's brother Joshua will wear to hide his appearance 13 years from now. What are the odds? Joshua changes into the Phoenix upon losing control at the sight of his father's death. Then Clive also changes into a Free due to Ultima's meddling. So we're back to the start of the game where these two were fighting each other. And as it turns out, there is a near bottomless hole right beneath this castle for the two to fall down. I know Joshua is just a kid, but he's telling a Free to stay away from him after he sent the both of them through a hole in the earth, and the only direction to go in is down, and he keeps flying in that direction. These dominant battles are visually impressive, but the scale is so off that I can't tell if either one is taking damage from all this. It's the Dragon Ball effect, where something will get hit with what looks like a continent-ending attack, only to smirk once the dust settles. The game even tells me I won at the end of the fight. Only in the very next scene, the fight continues after Joshua drills Ifrit all the way back to the surface. Then Ifrit wins by doing a UFC-style ground pummel on the Eternal God Bird that just ate a Hellfire and refilled his health bar. Nothing like a good old family tragedy to sprinkle some angst into the hero's journey. Shakespeare would be proud, or maybe just sigh heavily.
The rubble must have protected him from the worst of the flames.
A decent theory, except there was no rubble covering Clive where you found him lying.
Shall we take him prisoner?
No need for that. Kill him. Wait. As my husband never tired of telling me, he is a fine soldier. I'm sure he would make an excellent addition to the Imperial front line.
No, don't kill the one person who will almost certainly want some retribution for his dead brother and father. Instead, make him into a branded soldier in the Imperial army on my random whim. And she follows this up by having your guards kill her handmaidens. Why not do the same to them if you're in such a mood? Why even bring them out here with you if you're just going to have them killed for what they've seen?
We're down a man, Sergeant.
If we return without Shiva's head, our fate will be no different from Biast's. I'll take my chances with the Iron Blood. At least then I might die fighting.
13 years later, Clive is still serving the empire of Sambrek, and Jill turned out to be Shiva, and she's forced to fight for the Iron Crusaders who threaten to kill children if she doesn't do what they say. So they hold a sword to this kid's neck, then toss her the sword and leave without waiting around to confirm if she fights Clive or not, and she has no reason to since the child has been taken away and is no longer in danger. And since she loses, the kid should die, I guess. Everything about Jill and her own story is kind of rushed and disconnected from the rest of the greater plot. Clive doesn't recognize Jill until he was about to kill her. It's not as if she changed that much in 13 years.
You would betray the Holy Empire? Betray? I don't recall ever pledging allegiance to your emperor.
I have to wonder why Clive has been a willing lapdog for 13 years to the Empire that murdered his father, all the while wanting to find the person who he thinks killed his brother. In a short while, we learn about plenty of Branded who deserted and escaped from servitude, but Clive couldn't be bothered. Nice gesture, but you can still fight. I think turning your back and holding Jill while they slaughtered you is downright stupid.
This way.
Cid is the best character they've had since Auron of Final Fantasy X.
Torgal.
Hey?
His name is Torgal.
You two acquainted? Well then, you won't mind taking him off my hands.
You mean to tell me Cid has been looking after Torgal for years and never picked a name to call him? Also, Clive knew this dog as a puppy 13 years ago, yet doesn't seem curious why Torgal isn't nearing the end of his natural lifespan. Cid's hideaway is where the game goes to have a nap in between the actual interesting content. Most of your time here is spent running back and forth, speaking with one character who will tell you to go talk to another character, and if you're lucky, the trail ends there and you can go back to doing something interesting. More often than not, you'll spend a good deal of time running errands for the people here, before being tasked with going out into the world to do something that is very important but feels like a grocery run. The game follows this formula for the entire playtime. Every single time you complete some spectacular moment, you know it's followed by a lengthy stay at the hideaway.
Suit yourself.
Cid is the only person who can eat an apple and not look like an asshole.
I only stand here today because of Joshua. 13 years I've waited for this chance. I've slept in filth, drunk from a gutter, killed more men than I can count.
As it will turn out, both Clive and Joshua waited 13 years before doing anything about their driving convictions. The time skip's only purpose was to allow both of them to become hot and legal. One of Cid's men heard word of a dominant of fire hiding among the Brandon in a village inside the Empire. Clive wants to go after him, believing he could be the one who killed his brother, but there's an alternative no one ever brings up, that it could be a new dominant of the Phoenix. Once the old dominant dies, eventually the icon is reborn in a new person.
The fat chocobo is a demanding mistress, and we are too few to keep her on her feet. Might I persuade you to deliver a meal or two to souls in need of sustenance?
Final Fantasy traditionally never bothered with more than a few side quests for the entire game, being more preoccupied with minigames. That changed in recent years with Final Fantasy XV, 7 Remake, and 16, which are all filled to the brim with side quests. That can be a positive, since side quests can be freed from the main plotline, allowing writers to explore odd and novel plots and mission objectives. And to some extent previous games did manage that, mainly 7 Remake, but even 15 had weird side quests about making the best tasting ramen noodles. 16 fails, however. First, there's no organic structure to finding them. This isn't hard, but too many developers just paint an icon over an NPC's head to let you know they have a quest. It's boring compared to organically stumbling upon a side quest you can miss entirely. The majority of them are killer fetch quests with little interesting narrative to be found and little reward for them. Toward the climax of the game, there are a few that help establish the ending, which is a strange thing to pack into your final side quests, since most players will be ignoring them by that point, with their map clogged with quest icons. This marks the first Final Fantasy game where I have to complain about the lack of enemy types. Very few of the traditional classic Final Fantasy enemies made it into 16. There's some bombs, flans, a behemoth, a Mulbro, and a few others, but that's about it. I suppose this is a limitation of making a pure action game over a JRPG. Final Fantasy XVI had already done a lot to distinguish itself from previous games, but at times it felt like it was running away from it more so than embracing something new. For Christ's sake, there's not even a Tomberry or a Cactar anywhere in the game. I was under the impression that the PS5's M.2 drive made things like obvious loading gates a thing of the past, and this is a PS5 exclusive. Yet poor Clive has to use his back to prop up this boulder instead of pulling it away from the damn wall and letting it fall to the ground. There are ancient ruins dotting the landscape of Valisthea. Ancient civilizations are part of the course in Final Fantasy, but later it's revealed there was never an ancient civilization, humans having been the only civilization to ever be on this world, along with just one god who built all these structures for seemingly no reason. Sid fought his way through the entire forest before ever using his dominant powers against a giant monster. Yeah, using his power saps his life just like it does with all dominants in Branded, but after this moment he doesn't bother keeping his powers under wraps. As someone who's known plenty of smokers, you won't get them to toss a full cigarette away for no reason without grabbing it out of their mouth. Why does smoking have to be such a theatrical element to a character? Or a metaphor for their upcoming death in this case?
You flatter me, lad. But my days as a firebrand are long behind me.
Sid does not look anywhere old enough to be talking about being too over the hill to lead a revolution.
It is true my liege values loyalty above all else. But were you not quick to betray your countrymen for the promise of coin?
Killing valuable informants after they just gave you information because you are personally disgusted with their disloyalty seems like a dumb thing to me. You want informants inside enemy nations.
And instead of killing them, you lead the rats straight to us.
Mercy!
Morale cannot be high around this lady if she flippantly kills even her own men.
Lady Benedicta, we have secured the dominant.
I'm surprised Benedicta didn't kill this guy too for yelling sensitive information in earshot of Clive and Sid. Just because Benedicta blew some wind in your face and disappeared, doesn't mean you've lost their trail. They're probably just on the other side of the bushes. Chase after them.
13 years ago, I watched a dominant kill my brother right in front of me. And I did nothing.
Clive doesn't remember turning into a freak and killing his brother, so he assumes it was someone else, but apparently never tried to piece any part of it together. This would make for a pretty solid plot point if the players didn't already know the truth. So you spend the first several hours beating your head against the glass knowing that Clive is looking for himself while the game goes through the motions. I think the first thing you should do when interrogating a captive is pull their hood back so you can see who you're talking to and judge their facial reactions. I don't think Benedicta ever realized she was speaking to the Crown Prince of Rosaria, Joshua, the Dominant of the Phoenix, and just assumed he was a freak.
Within you lies the power to slay gods. The Phoenix perished in your flames. Yet you do not fight. You do not flee. You refuse your gift.
Benedicta serves the King of Waloed, Barnabas, who's working with Ultima, the main villain of the game. So the king knows who the dominant of Ifrit is. So why would he send Benedicta out looking for Ifrit's dominant, but not tell her who she's looking for? If the only reason Joshua isn't using his power to escape is due to his companion being in danger, you would be wise to keep that lady somewhere else. She isn't even restrained. What's to stop her from untying Joshua after you leave the room?
Pull the men back inside the care, Geralf.
He is here then.
Have them lead Sid and his little pet to the chapel. I shall entertain them there.
I want you to lay down your lives in a clear path that leads them directly to me. This is why I'm in charge here. The only dominants that ever seem to suffer from using their icon powers are the two allied with Clive. Benedicta defeated Sid, but instead of killing him, just walks away. She doesn't even try to leave with the dominant she captured, instead deciding to get some fresh air at the top of the keep's tower. I think you had Clive dead there if you hadn't pulled him back. He was falling to his death from that height. How does a dog do that without spinning the person around or breaking their neck?
How did you do it? How did you even survive? How?
The answer is simple, Benedicta. He was fighting for something he believed in.
You can dress this series up as Game of Thrones as much as you want and add blood, tits, and swears, but there's no getting rid of how cringy it is. Clive discovers he can hoverhand away a dominant's power and take it for himself. He's grabbed hold of Benedicta several times during this fight, and not once during that did he ever take her powers.
I created a diversion as commanded, Your Grace.
There's really no purpose in hiding Joshua with the cloak anymore. It's very apparent that it's him.
What do we have here?
Fetch a good price, I reckon.
But we'd be doing the slavers a disservice if we didn't appraise her worth.
With her powers stolen, Benedicta and her men are quickly taken down by some random bandits in the woods who are keen to rape her before selling her to slavers. It's always really crude when you go down this route just because the character happens to be a woman. Clive can use another dominant's power by stealing it away, which means the dominant can't use it anymore. But strangely, they can still transform into their icon.
She's drawn in too much ether. She can't control it. If Garuda isn't stopped, that vortex will swallow this whole forest.
Oh no, the forest. Anyways. Clive sees the same hooded figure he saw 13 years ago when his brother was killed by a freak. Joshua somehow ended up wearing the exact same hood and robe in the present as a mysterious person wore then and now. And the figure here then erupts in fire like he's the dominant of fire Clive is looking for. Even though I don't think Ultima knows Clive's current convictions about finding his brother's killer. Also, there was no reason for Ultima to wait 13 years after initially awakening Clive as a dominant before doing any of this.
Don't worry about us. You've been waiting for this. Go!
Sid!
Sid, dominant of Rama, is cut off by a small chunk of rubble falling onto the path. Garuda, who has wings and is the strongest in the air as the Warden of Wind, decides to fight Clive on her hands and knees. I find these HP damage numbers pretty ridiculous. Clive is doing regular 3-digit damage to her with his attacks and depleting her health bar. But in just a moment as a freak he'll be hitting for tens of thousands of damage per hit and it moves Garuda's health bar just as much. Clive transforms into a freak again, this time remaining conscious of who he is and now realizing that he was his brother's killer. But he won't let that information dwell on him when there's fighting to do, and he doesn't bring up this traumatizing information until later. Until this point, the game has been very earnest about establishing a serious tone. But you can't keep the anime at bay forever, so after a few hours of intrigue you get an epic battle with an icon. It's like HBO airing an episode of Dragon Ball right after Game of Thrones. How come when I'm beating on Garuda during the cutscene it still depletes her health bar, but not vice versa when she's beating on Ifrit? Sid puts a stop to Clive's rampage by turning on Rama and tasing him. This is the same guy who couldn't get past a rock a minute ago and watched the entire fight from afar instead of trying to stop it. Meanwhile, on a battlefield somewhere else, Bahamut and Odin fight and stalemate. I have no idea why these nations are fighting each other. They just are. Even though it's clear no side can win when they all possess dominance that cancel each other out.
I'm a monster! And I deserve to die! Since you're still breathing, you might as well make yourself useful.
I don't think I would throw a sword to a man who is clearly suicidal. Luckily for Sid, Clive recovers from his grief with no further prodding and follows along. By the way, I don't think Sid had a good reason for stripping Clive before locking him up.
While you've been relaxing in your cell, Gav's been busy sniffing out your dominance. And according to his last report, he's picked up a scent.
The person Clive has been looking for turned out to be himself. He has no reason to go looking for the keep guy at this point since he has his answer.
There's no question about it. He's a dominant fire, all right.
He can't be.
Clive should also at least be willing to accept that there's maybe a chance that his brother is still alive, given that the Phoenix always manifests as a member of his bloodline. You can pocket the rest of that unsmoked blunt, you know. Joshua survived his fight with Ifrit 13 years ago, and has no excuse for why he didn't contact his brother to let him know or try to free him from his life as a slave in the Empire, even after he learned that Ultima is after Clive specifically. Had Clive never ran into Jill and Sid, he would still be a slave for the Empire, and Joshua would be doing nothing to help him. Gav tracked down the unknown dominant of fire headed toward Rosaria, nearly getting himself killed for that info, and Clive doesn't seem that interested in following up on it until Jill recommended a trip there together. Before Clive can reach Phoenix Gate, he's advised that the only bridge leading to it is currently down after partially collapsing. This is one of those lazy video game progress gates, because Clive could easily jump over such a small gap or wade through the foot of water down below and continue on the journey without finding the bridge builder to repair it.
There's a darkness at the heart of this world, and I'd have you see it.
Clive was a slave soldier for the Empire you're critical of for its mistreatment of Branded. I think he knows. How could anyone not know in this world? He doesn't need a lesson on how horrible the lot in life of Branded is. In Eastwood, Clive meets the widow of the Lord Commander, the guy Clive trained with when he was a boy and who died when he transformed into a Ifrit 13 years ago. Clive feels too guilty about being responsible to sleep inside her home, but not guilty enough to explain to her what happened to her husband, and later accepts a leather outfit from her. Sid removed for a clever reference of Vivi from Final Fantasy IX with these scarecrows.
No wonder their crops are failing. The blight is leaching the ether from the soil. And when the last drop is drained, their fields will turn to this.
Plants need magic to survive apparently, not minerals or sunlight or water, but magic that courses through the planet, which makes me wonder just how the hydroponic plant Sid grows back at the hideout function if they're not getting any ether. Clive spots the man in the cloak walking into Phoenix Gate. I don't know why the game is keeping this charade up. It's not mysterious. I already know there are two separate people who for some reason wear the exact same cloak.
You're him. The second dominant of fire.
No, that would be you. And you know that already.
Joshua died. I killed him. And I blamed another for what I did. To spare myself the guilt.
It's very nice of Ultima to give Clive therapy by making him face his past and confront the fact that he's a freak, which is ironically more than Clive's own brother has done for him. As if the game wasn't already a little too much like Devil May Cry, this fight culminates in Clive gaining a devil trigger he can use to attack faster and harder while healing.
If he is here, then the disturbance I felt at the care must have been...
Joshua is standing right there looking at his brother. There is no reason for not letting Clive know he's alive or warning him about Ultima. Meanwhile at Castle Davbog, someone is reenacting Seven by sending Kupka his lover's head, Benedicta, in a box and blaming it on Sid. The village Clive passed through on the way to Phoenix Gate is raided by the Empire and everyone inside it killed. including Lady Hannah, who gave Clive his father's old Dracula outfit. Kupka's man is also there watching from the side and plans to follow them back to their hidden home. And this guy sent by Kupka couldn't possibly know that Clive and Jill are connected to Sid, and that thing with the head in the box just now happened. Yet this guy already had orders to find Sid.
Your Radiance!
You cannot mean a war of conquest.
That is exactly what I mean. It is time we expanded our dominion.
With the blight withering away their lands, the Emperor of Sambrek suggests they launch an invasion of the Crystalline Dominion and take their lands, as well as moving the capital to Twinside. The Empire is also currently at war with Ash for seemingly no reason. Bahamut and Odin just had a clash there. None of the wars being fought except this one seemed to have a point. And this one happens completely off screen and we never see any of it or even try to stop it. Later there's just a time skip to 5 years from now, and Sambrek has taken over the capital and moved from Oriflamme to Twinside.
We've all seen it firsthand. Empty wastes where once were green meadows. Land drained so dry of its ether, not even the rats remained. But where was it all going? I spent years searching for an answer, until I saw it standing right in front of me. There, in the self-same crystals we look to for their so-called blessing.
Square Enix clearly wanted a more character-driven plot, full of intrigue and backstabbing royals, but by the halfway point, all of that is dropped and we're tasked with killing God and saving the world from climate change.
Take this crystal. How does it allow us to conjure magics? Answer, by drawing ambient ether from the air. And where do these crystals come from?
That's easy. They're mine from the mother crystals.
They're one and the same. Although admittedly this here fits more easily in the pocket.
But the mother crystals are massive. Some as large as mountains.
So you see the problem. Imagine just how much ether can be drawn by something that size.
Shouldn't the world have died a long time ago then? These mother crystals have been around for as long as humanity can remember, drawing in the ether. But it's only now that the world is blackening.
If what you say is true, how did no one else see it?
Who says they didn't? Maybe the truth was inconvenient.
Did you really think it was clever if you dropped Al Gore's documentary?
Inconvenient to whom, exactly?
The higher-ups? The gods themselves?
If Sid wasn't attractive and possessed a voice that smooth, he would sound like just another conspiracy theorist who gestures toward people in power with no actual evidence for his claims.
The fewer our numbers, the better our chances of going unnoticed. And should that plan fail, well, we have our icons to fall back on.
When you can turn into a god of destruction, I feel you're above sneaking around. All three of you are dominants. Together you comprise the strongest faction in the realm. Given how just one dominant is enough to stalemate entire wars, who could realistically stop all three of you if you transformed and started destroying mother crystals at will? Instead, Sid wants to sneak into the holy capital to do the job covertly even though Bahamut is currently away.
We're less likely to be spotted if we travel separately. I'll meet you in Northreach in a few days.
It's a group of 3 people and a dog. Sid traveling by himself and making it 2 people and a dog doesn't change the likelihood of being spotted whatsoever.
Otto always did know how to please me. More than Sid ever did anyway. Do you think you could please me, Clive?
First instincts when writing a character is usually the wrong path to follow. For instance, if a character is only capable of speaking in a way that reflects their profession, then that writer is trying too hard with the portrayal. The dame runs a brothel and will get Clive into the holy capital, but she always speaks like this. Imagine you struck up a conversation with a plumber, and everything he said was innuendo about fixing pipes.
I fear the guards are not likely to let a masterless bearer pass unmolested. Unless, of course, his master deigned to appear.
If the security of this border gate is so ironclad that the only way through it is by pretending to be the dame's branded bodyguard, then sneaking into the capital to destroy the mother crystal there should be impossible. This gate was lightly guarded by 2 men.
Clive, my darling. Welcome to the Vale.
The game revels in the appearance of maturity by including a brothel that you can't enter. Don't include a fire station if there's not going to be a fire, and don't include a brothel if you're not prepared to show something actually illicit.
A wild beast is savaging my boy! Well, don't just stand there gawping.
No! You weren't supposed to kill Wolfie. You were supposed to die. Father will have you whipped for this. Bearers aren't supposed to win. They never win.
This entire segment before reaching the capital is focused on showing how bad the branded have it. something we've been beaten over the head with by now. But after this point in the game, the brand had largely stopped being a concern as the plot shifts to mother crystals and dominance.
The capital's crawling with soldiers, which is why we'll be taking the back door. Can't think of a safer place in the Empire than a... brothel.
The only security holes in the Empire appear to be brothels. I understand the appeal of building your capital next to a crystal the size of Mount Everest, but wouldn't it cast a shadow over the city for a good chunk of the day, or focus the sun's rays and turn it into a giant magnifying glass? And it glows at night, so no one would be getting much sleep with this thing shining through their windows. The game drops Clive into a crouch like this is going to be a stealth section, then immediately has you come across a room full of enemies and stops pretending there's a stealth mechanic. An aether storm is when the area is flooded with aether, causing any regular person or animal caught in it to go akashic, where they turn into a bluish-white, legally distinct White Walker. Clive, Jill, and Sid are not affected by ether due to being dominants, but none of them wonder why the dog Torgal can be down here and remain unaffected by the ether.
Time to earn that menacing title. Sid the Vicious, was it?
Getting a little too cute with the localization, are we?
Well, that didn't work. I think we're gonna need a bigger sword.
Mine's bigger.
Thank you, Clive, but I meant that figuratively.
Somewhere, Cloud is looking around like he thought he heard his name called. Sid turns into Rama to destroy the Mother Crystal, even though his body is on its last legs and starting to petrify from use of his power. He could have asked Jill or Clive to do it. A portal opens up in the crystal's place and the icon Typhon appears out of it, doing some fatal damage to Sid before pulling Clive in for a fight. This is all the work of Ultima, who wants to test Clive's capacity. It's one of those vague villain plans that they couldn't have possibly prepared for, because Sid was the one who came up with a plan to destroy the Mother Crystals, which incidentally is exactly what Ultima wants. Jill's here too, by the way. She just stands around doing nothing even though she can become Shiva. The dog is the only one who goes to stand by Clive's side. The MMO boss rears its head again here. The entire fight is you dodging circles on the floor.
I know who you are. And if you think I'm gonna let you have him.
Sid knows who Ultima is and that he's after Clive even though he's never alluded to those details before and was completely stumped on the existence of Ifrit. I don't think Sid has ever finished a cigarette in his life. I don't even believe he smokes. Sid grabs Clive's hand and transfers his powers to him. Clive is unable to stop this once it starts, but how this power works is inconsistent. He's touched both Sid and Jill plenty of times and never drew out their power. But with other dominants it happens completely by accident. Joshua shows up to stop Ultima from taking Clive, somehow knowing this is where Clive would be of all places, even with no hint of Sid's plan or that Ultima would show up here to claim Clive's body.
I'm sorry, Clive. Had I arrived but a moment sooner.
Any excuse for why you didn't yell out to him back at Phoenix Gate when you deduced Ultima would show up soon? This could have been avoided.
You have learned our name. What else have you learned, Phoenix?
Ultima is the first villain channeling ChatGPT. I almost expect him to start his lines with, as an AI algorithm. Joshua seals Ultima inside of his own body to protect Clive, then never shows surprise over encountering Ultima again years later despite having him inside his chest. The entire place collapses, but all of them make it out despite Clive and Jill being unconscious on the floor and Joshua on his knees behind all the falling rocks. And Joshua will still be separated from Clive for another 5 years and make no attempt at contacting him. But Clive at least knows he's alive now, I guess. Meanwhile, Kupka and his army found Sid's hideaway and slaughter everyone they come across while looking for Sid. All of the important people somehow escape though. And Gav loses an eye going back for this crystal that I don't think I ever saw again and certainly never had any importance placed on it before. 5 years after Sid's death, Clive has taken up his name and cause. Revolutionaries fighting for freedom while carefully managing their diets lest they indulge one time and can never fit into their tight leather outfits, only wasting 5 years growing his hair out instead of destroying the remaining mother crystals like Sid clearly spelled out for him.
Make a nice gift for your wife. Sausage, all from greens-fed farm birds.
Chocobo steaks? It's a bird. Are you selling unicorn bacon in the same stand?
Might I interest you in a potion, milady?
This medicine girl will become a reoccurring character in this half of the game, showing up and briefly interacting with major characters, and I foolishly expected a reason for her introduction, but never got one.
So those in the courthouse should be left to suffer.
That's not what I said. I simply meant it doesn't have to be you who frees them.
As always, whenever the main character is made the leader of a revolutionary outfit, they have to do everything on their own and still buy all the equipment needed to save the world with their own money. The age-old struggle of choosing between fighting systemic issues or hurling fireballs at giant monsters. The game was fine setting up a world based on institutional slavery, but that's a rather hard plot to resolve so it won't bother. From here on, the story is mainly focused on destroying mother crystals and fighting giant monsters rather than struggling against something you can't stop with magic. Why are Kupka's men having such a hard time finding where Clive resides? A few years ago, one of them just followed him back to the hideout, and it's not like Clive has taken any precautions to cover his tracks. The new hideaway is even more time-consuming than the previous one, with Clive having to consult several lore characters before every single mission. The pacing is so off-kilter that one wonders if the developers learned plot direction from grocery lists and Wikipedia edits.
Long though Sambrek's dominion over northeastern Storm has endured, recent days have seen the Blight wrest ever more land from her grasp. For which reason she has continued to wage war on her rival across the strait.
The Empire's war strategy: attack the place most affected by the very thing you're trying to avoid. And when that war is stalemated, they use the same plan on the Crystalline Dominion. One wonders why they didn't just attack the Crystalline Dominion first, since they had no dominant and were clearly the better choice geographically.
It was 5 years ago, while you were busying yourself with the destruction of Drake's head, that the Empire made its move, subjugating its theretofore neutral neighbor.
Clive, a world-saving revolutionary, and apparently a rather uninformed one at that. For the past 5 years, he's been completely unaware that Sambrek went to war with Balud for land, and then invaded the Crystalline Dominion and took Twinside as their new capital.
5 long years. If I could only command this power I've been granted, we might have achieved so much more. But each time I reach for it, it's like something is holding me back.
Clive has icon dysfunction, a condition that apparently doesn't affect bartenders like Jill.
He was there. It wasn't an illusion. I heard him call out.
Clive's logic: discover your long-lost brother is alive, then completely ignore said discovery. Gav was able to track down Joshua pretty easily before they even knew who he was. Now they never bother. Joshua's 5-year itinerary since saving his brother: walk, pause, think, look good, walk some more. His journey for answers isn't too different from that of a runway model's. This new hideaway is in the middle of a lake, but when I look at the location on the world map, there's no water to be found. If you're ignoring side quests by this point, and I wouldn't blame you for that, you may just miss out on the one that gives you a chocobo to ride. Why this was a side quest instead of being given to you is an odd decision.
With the bulk of the Republican army marching to Twinside, Drake's Fang will be left exposed.
That is exactly the move Kupka would anticipate. There is one place, however, where nobody will be expecting us to go.
Drake's breath.
Destroy a precious magical mountain-sized crystal once, shame on you. Destroy it twice, and everyone just ignores it. None of the kingdoms ever discuss the mother crystals being destroyed. It never comes up despite how important they are to them, and no one takes any precautions to safeguard them. This affair is a bit personal for Jill, since the Iron Kingdom were the ones who forced her to fight for them, and conceivably did horrible things to her that the game only alludes to. So of course Clive will be the one to do all the fighting, while Jill becomes a side character, her own personal revenge plot.
Was that the only way in?
Officially, yes. Strictly speaking, no. My uncle once told me that the nobles had tunnels built, so that they could visit town without having to walk amongst the rabble.
I guess there are no brothels in Rosaria, because Clive has to use a hidden tunnel the nobles built to sneak in.
It is why he remains ever vigilant. Don't be surprised if he refuses you an audience.
Since Clive's uncle is funding your resistance movement, why not send word ahead about Clive before he shows up? Instead, Clive has to perform a scene from a stage play his uncle loved to convince him that he's his actual nephew.
It is I, Sir Crandall of Camelot.
In this fantastical world, they dream of Camelot. Someone's creative well ran dry.
Oh, Clive, my dear boy, it's really you.
I guess Uncle Byron is another person Joshua didn't bother contacting to seek help from or let him know his 2 nephews were still alive.
I need to come to terms with my past.
You know this side character stepping up when he says, "I got this," and then proceeds to make you do everything. Clive went to all the trouble of killing the Black Shields of Rosaria and meeting his uncle, also they could get a ship to take them to the Iron Kingdom stronghold where a mother crystal is found. Then instead of heading there, the game sends you back to the hideaway, where some history homework is waiting for you.
Useful trick. Freezing and thawing the spray to make mist.
The Masters made me do it, when the Crusaders took to the seas.
Wouldn't the Iron Kingdom recognize this tactic if it's something they used to have Jill do to conceal them when she was forced to serve them?
Natural fortress.
But safety breeds complacency, allowing a single rowing boat to slip in unseen.
This game has to continue to come up with excuses for why no one ever guards their mother crystal. Jill creates a wall of ice so they can walk past the bridge and past the magma. But all she would have actually accomplished is creating a steam explosion that would have killed the both of them.
You hurt?
Just hot.
You are the incarnation of an air conditioner. How are you ever hot?
For years, I followed your orders, fought your wars, all to protect the children you took.
Jill's fighting motives, questionable. Irony level, through the goddamn roof. She fought for these people because they would threaten the lives of children if she didn't. Meanwhile, they regularly kill children in ritual sacrifices, and she knew that. The Iron Kingdom's threat boiled down to, I'll kill them unless... Oh wait, we do that anyway. Couldn't this guy just threaten to kill more children if Jill doesn't stand down?
I bowed to you once. Now it is you who shall bow to me!
Kill them.
Where does this confidence come from? He knows Jill is a dominant. He sent her to fight in wars like the one we saw where no human soldier could do anything against her. Everyone seems to forget their fear of dominance when it comes to the main characters. Ultima's fashion choices, never-ending suspense. Who's behind the cloak? Oh wait, we know. Ultima summons this fire demon and Jill can't do anything about it, so Clive has to take care of it even though he can't turn into a Freet, which isn't making Jill look good. You couldn't have done that to Clive's sword back when Sid had to transform into Ramu to destroy the other Mother Crystal. It was nice of Ultima to wait 5 more years before messing with Clive again. The medicine girl who was living in Kupka's Dalmakian Republic is now migrating to Twinside, which is controlled by the Empire of Zambrek, which is at war with Kupka, because during wartime immigration policies become lax.
For a moment there, I felt my brother's presence.
Joshua's plan, years of inaction, followed by sudden urgency. He could be with his brother, explaining things to him and helping him destroy Mother Crystals. It took him 5 years to decide he needed to speak with Dion and explain everything to him, but doesn't think his brother needs to know. He could at least send a letter.
Painful though it be to leave our home behind, it is what we must do to be free. Which is it that men cannot live without? A blessing that leads to damnation, or a freedom that leads to deprivation?
No one navel gazes harder than the prettiest twink in a JRPG.
If you would but take the field, their bellies would be full by nightfall.
If I take the field, so too will Bahamut, and our duel will shake the island to its foundations.
So what exactly is the point of a dominant then? You can't send one into war without the other side sending their own, and their presence doesn't seem to stop wars from breaking out. All that happens is that people start wars that they know will result in a stalemate, and then act surprised when they can make no progress. This lady had a kid in her 50s, and still looks like that.
Sid took the life of someone dear to me, a woman by the name of Benedicta. I swore to take his in turn. This would not be disagreeable to you, I take it.
Kupka's offer. He wants to kill Clive since Clive has taken Sid's name, and asks permission from Clive's mom to kill him in return for ending the war between the Dalmakian Republic and the Empire. He could have killed Clive without the deal. She enslaved her own son, and her nation is at war with his, so there can't be a stronger repercussion if Kupka succeeded in his revenge. Jill, from love interest and female lead to nap enthusiast, she will be mostly absent for much of the remaining game.
Clive, where are you?
When you're trying to emulate Game of Thrones, you should avoid cockblock moments and let people get their tits out.
There is an hell in Rosalith, trying to batter down the castle gates.
Kupka is laying siege to Rosaria to draw Clive out. If only he had remembered the ease with which he found the last secret base. 1 minute, Clive and Jill are fighting a monster in the heart of Rosalith. The next, as soon as it falls, Jill is taken captive by Kupka, who holds her arm behind her back. Dominants are basically demigods, except for when it comes to Jill. When you overpower your characters, you inevitably have to add plot band-aids like magical handcuffs that suppress their power if you want scenes where they're taken prisoner. After invading another country and seizing this city to get his hands on Clive, Kupka then decides to throw him in a cell so he can execute Jill of all people. It apparently takes a very long time to pick the log that they want Jill to kneel in front of for the executioner's axe. Torgal is approaching Scooby-Doo levels of intelligence, hanging back to remain unnoticed so he can launch his own rescue plan. Clive was locked up for one scene transition before being freed by Gav. If I were in prison for as short a time as Clive, I'd be asking for a refund on my experience. Gav then runs off to the right where there's nothing but a brick wall. No wonder he's their go-to scout. Torgal reveals that he's some sort of magical ice wolf, granted his power by Shiva without knowing, which is fine and all, but Torgal spends the entire game with Clive and takes orders from him. Jill and Torgal interacted a total of 1 time at the very beginning of the game. What kind of cops come off that easy without a key?
Go on. If they come again, we'll hold them back.
Can't have a big climactic party-based fight in this game now, can we?
Your master slew Benedicta Harmon and defiled her body.
Sid did everything in his power to save that woman, though she was long past saving. And so I did what he couldn't. It was me all along, Hugo.
Clive doesn't bother mentioning that Sid would never have done that to Benedicta, instead admitting to Kupka that he was the one who killed her. Who cares about truth when there's a perfectly good chance to escalate things?
The world has chosen. I am in my element.
Fighting on the ground gives Kupka an advantage, but unless you're flying, you're always fighting on the ground. After all, what are bricks but cut rocks? Clive doesn't even touch Kupka this time for his power to start flowing into him. Just how exactly does this trick know when to work? Twink punches carry deceptive weight.
Another time, Mythos.
Slipnir refers to Clive as Mythos, since Mythos can mean fantasy and Ultima can mean final, and with Ultima's goal being to take over Mythos, the villain and protagonist of this Final Fantasy game can be referred to as Final and Fantasy. Clive was in the throne room and then fell into a burial chamber beneath it during his fight with Kupka. Jill and Gav were walking toward that throne room after dealing with all the enemies. How did Clive manage to get behind them? Introducing Sid's daughter, Mid, because nothing says good parenting like a posthumous hello, or naming your daughter Mid.
I've been thinking about it for a while. Dad said I had a knack for engineering, told me everything he knew about it, then sent me off to Canva to learn everything he didn't.
I'm honestly surprised this world has a school for engineering for Mid to attend. Almost all technical labor is accomplished by the use of magic from either crystals or bearers. To give you an example, there's a side quest involving the Hideaway's blacksmith, where he shares the secret of a bellowed forge with a town of fellow blacksmiths after most of the crystals for creating heat are gone. This was technology that Sid came up with since he wanted a world without the mother crystals. So if there's a school of engineering, what are the graduates doing?
What do you want me to do?
First things first, I need equipment and materials to start making my own.
I have saving the world and stopping a revenge-fueled mountain from killing me on my hands, but the plot demands I set up a workshop for Mid first.
None of this would have been possible without your timely intervention, Prince Olivier.
Indeed, I doubt any of us would have had the courage to trade words with the mighty Titan.
Nothing says lasting peace treaty like entrusting it to a kid whose most significant negotiation was probably trading his chicken nuggies for Pokemon cards.
The men of the Fist will not withdraw until a peace treaty is concluded. So let us keep the negotiations open, give them time to gather what gold and trinkets they can, and once they deliver that which we demand, what worth is a piece of parchment?
If it were that easy to destroy the Dalmatians, why was there a conflict to begin with?
Prepare for battle.
But sire...
Dion, the moral compass who somehow misplaced north. He's against this plan since the fighting could spill over into the city and harm innocent people. The city that the Empire invaded and took over 5 years ago despite a non-aggression treaty. How did Dion feel about that little affair?
1,000 gold talents in those chests. See that they're added to my nephew's coffers, would you?
The money Uncle Byron brought Clive never goes into your guild pile. Also, a single gold talon weighed around 110 pounds. So 2,000 talon would weigh around 220,000 pounds. That's 110 tons Byron somehow put on a small skip boat and transported across the lake.
And by cutting through the Velcroy, a party traveling light would have Titan back in his bed, days before a galley could lurch into port.
The game goes on a long-winded thought experiment, trying to piece together which route Hugo Kupka took to return home to Drake's Fang. Does it matter if he went by ship or land? He still went to the same location, and all you have to do is head there. Traveling through the desert on foot, wearing nothing but black leather and with no supplies. This man is willing to kill himself from heat stroke to look good. Throw a hood up and suddenly you're the world's master of disguise. Nothing says I'm not important, like dressing like Dracula during a summer barbecue. Helps if you have it come down over your face like Ultima and Joshua did though.
I'll never know. Dominant or not, he's a bloody idiot.
That'll be Kupka, then.
Uncle Byron apparently went to the Loud Whisper School of Espionage. Joshua being within spitting distance of family drama and not intervening. Must have forgotten his popcorn. He's staying at the same inn where Clive and Byron get into a fight, and his attendant witnesses this, and can't have missed that it's Clive, but instead of informing Joshua, has him flee out the window so the two brothers can remain out of contact again for no reason. A whole detour to sidestep 4 measly guards. Someone's overestimating the competence of NPC soldiers. I'm sick of not causing a fuss. Clive is on his way to Dragon's Fang anyway, where he'll have to fight a dominant and destroy a mother crystal. Even if Kupka got wind of him, he would just come out to meet Clive.
It's not too late, Clive. Rosaria is yours by right. and there are those that would help you to take it back.
I take it that Clive hasn't told Uncle Byron that his nephew Joshua, the Crown Prince of Rosaria, is still alive, otherwise he wouldn't be suggesting Clive take the throne. Someone attached big metal hands with 0 points of articulation to Hugo Kupka's arms and then had him try to eat with a spoon. I like to think this was his staff pranking him rather than an earnest effort to help. Once again, the path to a Mother Crystal has been cleared for Clive, with orcs having killed all of Hugo's men.
Let the trial begin.
Ultima is testing Clive at each Mother Crystal, and I have to wonder to what end. What happens if Clive fails and dies? Ultima has no backup plan as far as I can tell, and this world will soon be dead at its current rate, so he won't get another chance at attaining a dominant like Clive. This Akashic enemy called the Undertaker has a move called the Spirits Within. Not a name I would bring up again in this franchise. Ultima has a peculiar taste in his not-safe-for-work content, driving Kupka a bit mad by applying some of the more forbidden porn tags like monster and cucking. I like the Titan fight, but you have to admit that the first half of it is just fighting a pair of legs.
Nice trick. But if you can do it, then so could I!
Clive's methodology: see it, like it, want it, copy it. He'll discover all of Ifrit's powers by assuming that just because another dominant can do something, then so can he. Kupka eats an ether crystal and completely changes the music and gameplay style into Sonic the Hedgehog. Are you sure that wasn't a Chaos Emerald? If the fight against Titan was against his legs, the battle with Titan lost is entirely against his hands. I enjoy this game's music, and I even like this song that differs from all the opera music, but wow, is it out of place with the rest of the soundtrack. Now that's the good shit right there.
Ether from the Mother Crystal. If you can do it.
Again with that, anything you can do I can do better asspull. The Mother Crystal appears from Titan's body, so Clive can destroy it. Wouldn't Kupka eating it also destroy it? He took several bites out of it.
Consciousness. We see now. Human will is so insubstantial it cannot exist in isolation. You mitigate its weakness by interweaving it with your consciousness.
What does that even mean? Stop animating. You're supposed to be Game of Thrones now.
We believed we had merely to purge you of your will to claim our vessel. It appears we first have to sever every thread of the consciousness that supports it.
I have no idea what Ultima is talking about, and neither does the game, because he keeps doing what he's been doing, which is have Clive absorb the powers of other dominants by fighting them. How did Torgal survive all that stuff that just went down with Titan, and then find Clive so quick after it was over? The refugee medicine girl, who was last seen fleeing Dalmatia to the nation Dalmatia was attacking, is now at the camp of the Empire's military trying to sell her wares to them. The Final Fantasy series finally realized that yes, pretty boy twinks can be gay. Only took them 16 games to figure that one out.
To prevent their forces from breaching the southern defenses and storming Twinside. And so the capital would become a battlefield.
In hindsight, moving the capital to Twinside seems like a pretty poor strategic move that doesn't seem to have an upside.
Forgive the intrusion, Your Highness.
The first meeting of the Council of Twinks.
The people of the Hideaway must hear the news. Justice has been done. Hugo Kupka is dead. Tell them that those wounds might finally begin to heal.
Instead of gathering everyone to share the good news, let's make a depressing scavenger hunt out of it. After that riveting round of busy work, Mid as you collect materials so she can build a ship in case you need one later. You can choose to bring along Jill or some doctor lady with you on that last errand. I'm not sure why you're forced to choose between Clive's potential love interest and a character who just tells Clive he can't speak with her patients right now. Clive and Jill are on their way to a relationship, but because none of the precious animation budget can go towards anything but giant icon battles, most of their scenes get animated like this. I can't feel anything for two characters who possess the body language of wax dolls slowly melting.
The blight marches on, so our mission remains unchanged. We cannot stop until every Mother Crystal is gone, and their thirst for ether with them.
Has anyone bothered asking why the blight hasn't at least slowed with 3 of the 5 Mother Crystals destroyed? At some point you should reassess whether Sid's theory about them was correct based on observable evidence.
I see the reports are true, Father. You have surrendered the throne to Olivier. How is he to rule an empire?
Dion's lifelong sibling rivalry seems a tad overplayed. Maybe they forgot to show us the part where his little brother borrowed his toys and never gave them back. He's rightly pissed that his father made Olivier our emperor. But so far that kid hasn't interacted with anyone but his mother's lap. But Dion has nothing but burning hatred for him. There had to have been family moments in the past 13 years, something that might have made Dion feel at least something familiar toward his own kin. But the game never bothered with any complexity in their relationship.
All shall bow before their emperor.
Father, these are the words of a tyrant.
Did you have any complaints when he invaded and took over the city you are currently standing in 5 years ago?
Just tell us what happened.
It's betrayed us, Pass. It's gone. We cannot ride the caravan without it. We won't even be able to get through the flipping checkpoint.
Because a simple go destroy this isn't enough, here's an ancillary objective that requires a flowchart, a map, 3 consultants, and a 10-step program just to get past a checkpoint. Awfully brazen for Dion, who is now suspected of possible heresy and treasonous thoughts by his father, to meet with Joshua, the believed dead son of the Empress, inside the capital's reception chamber. Joshua doesn't even hide his appearance with a cloak anymore.
But that wound is proof enough that evil is afoot.
Then I have your answer, Your Highness. You will join me in my fight.
Why exactly did you seek to explain everything you know to Dion? I don't even know what Joshua was planning to do after getting Dion on his side, but he prioritized recruiting him over Clive.
Have you threatened my father?
Of course not. I merely whispered in his ear that his mongrel son is plotting a rebellion.
What?
That was a lie you made up about Dion to turn his father against him and toward your son. And now Dion will that you rubbed it in his face that his father is being manipulated by you. Why piss off a man who can turn into a god dragon?
For their crimes against the crown, the traitorous Annabella and her usurping son shall be put to death, and the empire restored.
Killing your own little brother seems a bit too far. At this point, you would likely think he's just a puppet in his mother's plan. Clive must climb the building to reach the roof, while Torgal can just leap up with a single bound. While Dion's rebellion is happening, Clive has to find Goots, because despite their cover story being that the two of them were hired mercenaries for a traitor, they split up once in the city for no reason other than creating an objective for themselves. Dion already changed into Bahamut and is attacking the city. It seems he's gone temporarily insane off-screen, so Clive will have a reason to fight him. The Mother Crystal reacts to him and changes into a giant flower, seemingly because it understands visual allegories, and wants to resemble the flower that Dion was given by his father.
What happened here?
He tried to take him from me!
That couldn't be the result of my own poor decision to rub my machinations in the face of my stepson, could it? No, of course not.
Is the child you made with the Emperor?
Half-brothers get no love in this world.
Honorable Elwyn, always thinking of his precious homeland. But what worth is a homeland in a world beset by the Blight?
You had no plan for dealing with the Blight, though. You wanted to make your son emperor of all of Valisthea, which would soon be nothing but a dead rock.
And I will do my duty.
Jill is here too, by the way. Joshua can get up from having the crap kicked out of him by Bahamut to fight alongside Clive, while Jill sits around doing nothing. She may as well be keeping Clive's beer cold with her powers. The great battle of Twinks has begun. May the best hair win. Bahamut drinks in ether from the Mother Crystal to power up, and then Ifrit and Phoenix fuse into one, seemingly without the two brothers even knowing they could do that. Accidentally fusing into one body should come with a little shock on behalf of the two people. The battle moves into space because that's just what Japanese developers love doing to up the stakes. They just normally wait until the end of the game since you can't really top a battle in space. Also, shouldn't Clive and Joshua be a little amazed at the sight, at least mention it afterward that they saw the world from space, but they act like going to space is no big deal. Fire, famously known for working in the vacuum of space, along with breathing and flying with wings. In short, all the mechanics of this fight make actual physics seem dull. Hey, it's the attack that killed Donald Duck in Kingdom Hearts 3. How does one push light back with their hands? And why can they only do it when they're motivated enough? None of them die from re-entry. Clive even falls straight down to Earth after destroying the Mother Crystal, while Joshua saves Dion.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
No explanation will be offered for why this reunion couldn't have happened years ago. Nothing was keeping Joshua away from Clive, and he will remain by his side from here on out. Maybe he was waiting for a grander entrance. It's a little unclear, but Dion sees Ultima standing where the newly crowned Tween Emperor Prince Olivier stands. What I'm unsure of is if he was just using magic to trick all of them into thinking he was a young boy and child of the Imperial family, or if the kid was a legitimate son and was being controlled by Ultima. If it's the latter, then his story was kind of heartbreaking in a way that was glossed over. Joshua and Clive don't even care that their brother was just killed in front of them. Taking Dion's powers after all that should probably kill him just like it did with Sid, but all it does now is allow Clive to see the moment right before Dion went on a rampage, something it hasn't done any of the other 3 times and will never do again. After confronting his father, Dion tried to kill Olivier only for his father to take the spear for him. Then Olivier commanded Dion to change into Bahamut and fight Clive, and that's what happened. Interestingly enough, Dion left his spear inside his father's body in the throne room when he transformed, but he had it on him when he was falling out of the sky and used it to kill Olivier once he was back on the ground. And so ends the Amber Herd of Final Fantasy.
The ties that bind you shall be severed, and humanity return to its proper place.
Ultima makes the sky get cloudy. This is supposed to break people's will in order to separate their consciousness from one another, or perhaps deprive them of vitamin D. The only thread of Game of Thrones remaining in this game's style is occasional nudity. Ultima appears as Benedicta of Barnabas. I don't really get why, other than to be kind of creepy. Barnabas is his loyal servant who worships him as a god. Why get him horny?
Soon, Mythos shall become our perfect vessel.
And then shall the world be remade.
Not before the bonds are severed. Of trust, of respect, of love. Only when every strand of consciousness is cut away, may Mythos return to our side.
Previous villains in the game, you can at least understand their motivations and even sympathize a bit. Barnabas doesn't even have that going for him since he just comes across as a dumbass for buying into Ultima's terrible arguments. Making the scene uncomfortable and implying incest at the last second and never bringing it up again just makes me more confused over what they were going for with Barnabas.
We had as many owls arrive while you were at the shelves. Martha's got a Akashic out her gates, and talk of monsters roaming the hills outside of Northreach has put the wind up Isabel and her lot.
And don't forget Dalimil. Lubor says the village was raided by bandits.
It's back to MMO-style grinding, so the game can drag on even longer by forcing you to do what feels like mandatory side quests. Clive has several problems to take care of that are only tangibly related to the actual world-ending dilemma he's currently facing. Instead of covering them in depth, just assume they're all as boring as they have been up to this point, and let's move on by sending all 3 at once. For God's sakes, this video is already over an hour long.
Had I but reached out to him sooner. Warned him of the threat Ultima posed.
Hindsight is a bitch, ain't it? You could have done so much good had you decided to talk with people instead of remaining mysterious.
8 wardens for 8 elements.
The 8th element, water, is being saved for DLC though.
The Undying are loyal servants to the ducal throne. Or more specifically, to its heir. They have served our family for generations, albeit from the shadows.
So your family possesses an entire secret society that didn't bother rescuing Clive from his 13 years of slavery? Maybe they were just really, really secret.
The girl is still here, somewhere in the city. Her consciousness fair dripping with her late father's hubris. A consciousness to which Mythos is inextricably bound and inexorably drawn.
Barnabas is laying siege and destroying the free cities of Camber looking for Mid, believing that killing her or whatever will somehow make Clive more susceptible to Ultima's control. At least I think that's his plan. I'll be honest, I have to fill in a lot of Barnabas's goals throughout his story arc because the game doesn't bother.
A handful managed to lock themselves in their villas before the Horde arrived.
I'm sorry, but we couldn't save them.
It was over before we arrived.
Clive found Mid, his uncle, and Gav quickly enough, but now the mission becomes rescuing people from their villas, only for that to be a waste of time since they're all dead. It was a badly concocted reason for Clive to make his way through the city and end up running into Slipnir and Barnabas.
Get back.
Better idea. All 3 of you attack him. You're all dominants after all.
You would allow this delusion of free will to bar your path to greatness? Truly, your volition is a cancer, one that must be excised.
Villains like this, who believe free will is the worst thing ever, always suck. It's not something anyone can relate to, and it never even makes sense because it takes free will to even come to that conclusion. It's just a ridiculous premise that seeks to make the loss of individuality the main threat. But there are better ways to go about doing that. In fact, this game already had one, with the bearers. But you can't solve that with lightning magic, so they dropped it. Jill's finally doing something with her power. Losing.
It's alright, Mid. Jill is fine.
The ether of her icon endures. And as long as it does, we can be certain she is alive.
Hold up. You can detect that a dominant is alive by sensing their ether? Then how come Clive, along with every other dominant, was dumb to Joshua being alive? In order to go after Jill, they need Mid's mithril engine-powered ship running, which she has no idea how to finish, but somehow Sid's old writings will tell her, which means a trip back to the hideaway to search her workshop to find them. There, Clive finds an old doll Sid gave to Mid that contains a riddle that leads to Mid's first creation, the jukebox in the pub here at the hideaway, where Sid hid a part for a ship that didn't even exist yet that fixes an engineering issue that also didn't exist. Keep in mind that Sid envisioned this ship originally being a life raft in case their plan to stop the Blight failed, and yet he bet all that on a stupid riddle for people to solve.
The light! I thought this cove was meant to be hidden!
I think there's a few too many lights to extinguish at this point, and they've already found the secret cove, so it would be pointless anyway. This is the same guy who needed a bridge builder to get across a hole a little over a meter wide.
You are my offering to Mythos. I would not see you damaged.
Ultima ordered Barnabas to sever all of Clive's connections, or whatever that bullshit was that is supposed to make him weaker to being taken over. Wouldn't killing Jill advance that cause? I mean it when I say I never understood what Barnabas was trying to do. He's simply goading Clive into fighting him, which is what Ultima has already been doing, and hasn't worked. Uncle Byron takes off to raise an army for Clive. An army that will never materialize or be needed.
The bond of consciousness which joins them condemning both to the same fate. Yet my every attempt to strike it from their hearts serves only to tighten its hold.
What exactly did you try to do to sever their consciousness again? You launched an attack on the free city of Camber to get to Mid for some reason. Never found her, then briefly fought Clive and beat him in a fight, then kidnapped Jill and never did anything with her. Barnabas sinks his own ship by pulling a biblical move and dividing the ocean. Clive and Jill are still on board, but are just fine though.
Get as far away as you can.
Jill is here too, by the way.
You mean to turn everyone Akashic?
Not turn, Mythos. Turn back. For too long has mankind been led astray by their clamorous wills. It is time they return to a world of quiet equality.
The goal is to turn everyone into NPCs, a strange plot for a video game to be sure. Clive and Jill outrun the entire ocean collapsing behind them, running across the muddy, silty soil of the ocean floor all the way to land, which was nowhere in sight when they were back on the surface.
The gap when we fell. They made it, Jill. And they will have seen the ice where it led.
The ice that was at the bottom of the ocean? And they're gonna see it in the dark? How? Jill is Shiva, the Warden of Ice, but had to remove all of her clothes to dry lest she freeze, and Clive is Ifrit, the Warden of Fire, and had to do the same. Neither of these two should be in any danger of hypothermia given their respective powers. Jill gives Clive her powers because it's not like she was putting them to any use. Also, this is right after Barnabas explained that Clive's purpose is to take the powers of all the dominants and grow strong enough to be the vessel for Ultima. So this only furthers Ultima's plans. Thanks for helping, Jill. The post-nut clarity be hidden.
But they know we're coming now. We'll need a plan. And a damn good one at that.
Then let's go home and find one.
For crying out loud, you are on the coast of Waloed right now. Why do you need to head back to the hideaway to come up with a plan that will basically be go back to Waloed and walk to the last Mother Crystal? Can this medicine girl get some development, or at least a name if she's going to keep showing up in the plot? She better be a major character in the DLC.
Leaving already, are you?
How long will it take us to get back to Ash?
Dunno, about the same amount of time it took us to get here.
Nothing illustrates how much your time is being wasted by the hideaway than this statement.
You see, Clive, you had the answer all along.
Do you think you can get us back to that beach, Mid?
The way into Waloed is to head back to the very beach Clive and Jill were picked up from. The same beach where they stated they needed a plan to enter Waloed that could only be discovered back at the hideaway.
A large party would only attract unwanted attention, as well as slow our march, and require supplies which may be difficult to obtain.
Only Joshua and I will be going.
This again, your opponent is a god who seems to know everything you do. Barnabas is even expecting you to show up.
Understood that you decided to save the world all on your own, and that you die without her power.
Blame the developers, Joshua. They were sick of animating her just standing there doing nothing. At least Jill now has an excuse to not be there.
This stronghold is as old as Phoenix Gate, perhaps older. It may yet hide Ultima's remaining secrets, and if we are to best him, they must be unearthed.
Ultima has been in control of this land for years now. If there was any information that he wanted kept secret, you would think he would have had it destroyed by now. Remind me again why you decided to come here with only Gav and Joshua if you were found out as soon as you arrived. Odin even makes a barrier around the capital that prevents them from reaching the Mother Crystal until they deal with him. Everyone in Waloed is either dead or turned Akashic, except for this lone pregnant woman, because the game needs a hopeful message for the future inserted at the very end.
Ultima and this vessel, Ifrit. Garuda, Ramu, Shiva, Titan, Bahamut, Odin. Even Leviathan the Lost is here.
Leviathan will have to wait for the DLC.
Prejudice and persecution, severance and strife. Every earthly wrong springs from the malice in men's hearts. Malice born of the pain and suffering that is free will.
Barnabas can't go one scene without spouting off about consciousness, human wills, and serving the Lord. At some point, a villain needs to realize that his speeches are having no effect on the person they are intended for. None of it really means anything to me. It's all anime-sounding nonsense that you have to sit through until he draws his sword and starts another fight with Clive. Barnabas' final fight is probably the best one in the game, since it's the only one that doesn't devolve into trying to one-up itself on spectacle, and for the most part is a straight-up duel between Clive and Barnabas. It's sort of helped that it's essentially a clone of a Dante and Virgil fight.
You were shown a fantasy.
What kind of fantasy, Clive? A final one?
That world is worth saving, even if it means killing a god.
The world full of wretched slave labor? That one? Really? Probably should have kicked him off your legs sooner, before he finished transferring his powers to you.
I'm coming home.
You need more development than a character saying mother as they die for me to care or feel sorry for them.
I need you to lend me some of your best men, preferably all of them.
Uncle Byron is here to recruit all the soldiers defending this city from the 200,000 orcs and Akashic assaulting it, which would have the effect of leaving the city undefended so everyone in it would die. Would Dion's dragoons really keep serving him after he went berserk on the capital?
But I shall rally as many of my dragoons as I'm able.
Dion says this, but he's the only one that goes to help out Clive later.
You will find a girl there. I owe her my life, and I always pay my debts. You are to see that she is provided for.
Does this girl have a name so she can actually be found?
We know that the Mother Crystals have been leading the land of Ether. And we also know that it's this which hastens the spread of the Blight.
That's still only a theory. The fact that the Blight hasn't slowed despite there being only one crystal remaining should have you concerned.
The truth about Ultima's prize. For so long, I believed it to be you, and you alone. Yet, it is not merely Ifrit that he desires, but Ifrit and Phoenix both. That which we became in the skies over Twinside. Only when the twin flames are joined shall his vessel be complete.
Which seems odd because Ultima nearly got Joshua killed back when he was a child, and in no way focused on Joshua in the same way he did Clive despite needing the both of them. Impressive jump, but why not use the much narrower gap right next to it? Remember back to when Clive needed a bridge builder to fix a much smaller gap so he could cross a bridge? Clive and Joshua face a massive wave of enemies at the base of the Mother Crystal, only to be saved by Mid bringing the Enterprise right up to the wall and letting off their friends to help them, which was something they said they couldn't do earlier, and is the whole reason Clive and Joshua had to trek on foot across the whole of Waloed to reach the capital, and now it's no problem at all to sail right up to the Mother Crystal. So far, a Dominant that has had their powers taken can only turn into an icon, but here's Jill using her ice powers.
You all know what it is that awaits us beyond this gate. And we shall face it together.
You can't pretend you have a typical RPG party now. For proof, Ultima shows up and teleports Clive and Joshua away, and only Torgal the dog has the sense to jump into the portal.
Welcome to our darkness, a rift between worlds wherein your kind might reflect.
Since Ultima has played his plot cards close to his vest, he has Clive walk through an ethereal hallway of exposition dumping that seems to crop up in way too many games these days. According to Ultima, it's not the mother crystals that cause the blight, but the use of magic. Ultima came from a world that used magic heavily, and eventually it fell to the blight. So he cast off his physical body and fled to a new world, Valisthea. But the blight would begin again there due to his continued use of magic, so he decided to create a new world, which would require two things: an enormous amount of ether to create it, and a body strong enough to cast the spell. So they created the mother crystals for the former and the humans for the latter. As they slept and waited, humans awoke instead of remaining thralls with no will of their own, and that seems to be where Ultima's problems began. Meanwhile, all I can think of is that they clearly borrowed the plot from Final Fantasy IX.
And now, you would have us forfeit them. All for a place in your new paradise.
Do you imagine yourselves worthy of one? Mankind has no place in our world.
JRPG villains never seem to realize how bad they are at convincing the hero with speeches like this.
Such foul attaint may not be sublimed through game standing.
This villainous English lit professor requires you to bring a thesaurus with you to understand what he's even talking about.
How many lives have you saved since taking my name?
Fewer than we have ruined.
So why not leave it all behind?
Leave it all behind.
Ultima tries out that trick from anime where they show the protagonists every major character they've known and have them make arguments for their position in their voice, as if it isn't incredibly obvious what you're doing. After several incredibly weak arguments like this, Clive is ready to give in until his brother snaps him out of it. Nothing in Clive's character would lead you to believe he was wavering on his beliefs or struggle, so this should have been a laughable attempt to him.
Are you still talking?
I'm right there with you, Clive. Ultima doesn't really say much despite all the words he uses, fitting for a guy named after the last syllable in a word.
This is no mere evolution, it is deviation. And herefrom does Logos rise.
Ultima grows upset that Clive is debating with facts and logic, and fireballs. You see, Logos is the appeal to logic, and if Ultima has recognized that they're using logic against him, or Logos, then it goes that his own will or goal doesn't, and he's aware of that. One normally will always try to argue from logic, or at least how they perceive it.
And so the crystals are no more. Yet in their silence, a new song rings.
The only thing I hear is you ripping off Sephiroth's piano chords. Ultima makes the city float into the sky and grows a new mother crystal over it, becoming Origin, the place where all the stolen ether was sent to. Meanwhile, Clive and crew return to the hideaway to discuss it, and then ask Clive to run some personal errands for them since they can't be bothered by the end of the world.
Your brother mentioned that some few of the dominants who had lost their power to you were still able to prime. Is that true?
It is. But their icons no longer submitted to their will.
Then mine will have to be stronger.
Dion strengthened his will real quick. Is there a reason? A good reason? Why Jill can't go? She, like Dion, can still prime into an icon. And if Dion can remain in control, I see no reason why she couldn't. Dion is great at handling multiple guys on top of him. I keep nailing all the QuickTime events, but I'm still losing the cutscene. Can we turn the difficulty down on the cinematic moment? Try Disaster doesn't even phase Ultima, but later he will lose to Clive's right hook. This makes Dion's second time falling out of the sky, and he actually dies this time, presumably. This sin is here in case DLC changes things. Joshua unbuttoned his shirt between scenes just so the big glowing curse where he stored Ultima is easier to see. I'm sure there's no upcoming reason for that.
They sacrificed their flesh to become beating hearts of crystal that pumped the land's lifeblood from the depths of the earth unto this very chamber. And thus would they labor still, long after their work was done, had you not set them free.
You meant for us to destroy the mother crystals. It's what you wanted all along.
Ultima is a collective consciousness of several identical beings, the rest having sacrificed their bodies to become mother crystals, which were freed upon being destroyed and can now rejoin Ultima. He really lucked out that Cid came up with that plan, because otherwise Clive never would have gone on a crusade to destroy them.
People once knew that Ultima was their god, that he created them. And they worshipped him, prayed to him, looked to him for guidance.
In vain.
In vain. For he did not listen, did not acknowledge our will, and so we strayed from his path to forge one of our own.
Isn't that the deal with every religion, though? People pray and gods never answer. And people just tell themselves that God works in mysterious ways. We are very good at pretending that we know the will of God without confirmation. And what's more, the people of this world came up with new gods to worship. And those gods don't listen either, since they don't exist, but know when to bend in those faiths. With his dying breath, Joshua gives Clive his powers, which Clive already had since the start of the game. You can't really top a battle in space, but the game sure tries by making space trippier. As heir to the WinRAR fortune, I may have legal grounds to sue Square Enix over every boss having an ultimate attack that requires it to be unzipped first.
You think you know me? You know nothing, Logos.
If it hadn't tried so hard to be like Game of Thrones, this line would have slipped right past me. And it's said during the moment when it's most like a Final Fantasy game, no less.
So sure of your place atop the world, you refuse to acknowledge those below. You chose to remain alone. And so you shunned the one thing that could have made you stronger. Pushed away the hands that could have raised you higher.
A bit of an ironic message to send in the most lonely Final Fantasy game to date. Clive fights the final boss all by himself.
The world you seek is but a fantasy!
The only fantasy here is yours. And we shall be its final witness.
I wonder just how good the writers felt when they wrote that line. This series has been holding that nut in for over 30 years. I bet they had to smoke a cigarette afterward.
What do you imagine will befall this world now that you have gained your precious freedom?
George R.R. Martin hasn't written those books yet, so who knows?
Your world is already dead. May you enjoy an eternity on its blackened husk.
He has a point, but the game just says nah, and skips ahead a few hundred years or so to show that the world is just fine. Turns out all that power was too much for Clive's body after all, and the petrification curse is now spreading. So he uses the power he obtained to destroy the last Mother Crystal, even though I don't think that does anything now with Ultima dead. Clive then washes up on a beach afterward and supposedly dies, only for the after credit scene to imply that Clive lived, wrote an autobiography titled Final Fantasy, and used his brother as a pen name. Jill is here in the ending too.
Just this very morn, I found him with his nose buried in my nuts.